Hello, welcome back to my channel, Rethink ADHD. A few videos ago, I talked about this concept called double empathy, and I shared it with a bunch of family and friends who are also neurodivergent, either autism or ADHD, and they were like, what is that? So I have decided to do an entire video on it because I remember not knowing, actually not that long ago, like maybe a few months ago, also not knowing about this concept. And I truly believe that it has revolutionized my life and my relationships and even my job and my professional experience. So let's dive into it. So double empathy, if you're not familiar, this is by no means the Webster or whomever's dictionary definition. Just if you want to go do that, do it. I'm not going to give it that. So I'm going to give you my interpretation of it, and then we can connect on that. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, go to Google. So double empathy is this idea that the neurotypical world has to meet us neurodivergent people halfway. Historically, the way that we've talked about neurodivergence, whether that be ADHD or autism or whatnot, is that the neurodivergent person is the broken one. We're the people who are late, we are disorganized, we're selfish, we're all these different things that nobody wants to be labeled. And that's what we get thrown with. And usually it's because we just have a different way of thinking about the world. And it's not that we're selfish, we're lazy, we're never gonna be on time, we're disorganized. It's really just our lived experience is different. And so historically what that has meant is that it's on us as the ADHDers to adopt ourselves, to bend and flex and move ourselves as much as we can to fit into the neurotypical world. Whether that drives us crazy or not, nobody really has ever asked us, and honestly, nobody has really cared up until this point. So double empathy is an exact counter to that. It is saying, hey, neurotypical community, family members, friends, you need to meet me halfway. There are some things that I'm gonna be good at, just like there are some things you're good at, and there are gonna be some things that I'm not good at, just like there are things that you're not good at. And so if we can connect empathetically on the experience of not being the best at some things and also being pretty good at some other things, then you can get to a place of understanding. Instead of criticizing me, we can get to curiosity. And I'll talk about curiosity versus criticism a bit in this video. So we can reach a deeper level of understanding and hopefully a better relationship overall for everyone involved. So that's a really different shift for me. And I remember actually learning about it maybe a couple months ago. Before I started coaching, I actually didn't learn it in the context of myself. I learned it in the context of my partner who has autism. And the reason for that actually was because one thing that people with autism, or at least my partner's autism, she has a hard time picking out like the key pieces of information. So if she were to tell you a story, it would have the highlights, but those little intricate details that really make the story sticky might be missing. It's just not part of the way her mind works, and that's okay. For me, as the listener to the story, my question was always, how could you leave this detail out? This is a really important piece of the story. What happened? Where did we go wrong here? And I remember thinking like, what? And it was kind of frustrating. I remember her trying to explain and me trying to understand and really just not getting there. So I went to the internet and I started looking up, what is this? Is this something that's specific to autism? Is it something with my ADHD? How can we overcome this hurdle? And I came across something called double empathy. And so double empathy allowed me to realize that there are gonna be things, just like with me, that she's good at, and then there are things that she's not good at. And that's okay, because there are things that I can do, because I'm uniquely good at them, to help fill in the gaps. It's a matter of meeting a person halfway. Now, when I thought about this concept, it seemed like, duh, like of course, like it's, of course, you double empathy. You just kind of try to meet the person, see it through their eyes, and, accept people for who they are. I thought, duh, why didn't that occur to me? Part of the reason why I thought duh is because if we had a different culture, so if, I'm from a specific cultural background and I met another person who's from a different cultural background, and we didn't necessarily see things eye to eye, we could at least get to a place where we could agree on some core things so that we can reach common ground. The person, actually, we have a word for people who don't do that. So if you were the type of person who expects everyone to adjust to your culture and how you view the world, and you never take an insight or interest or curiosity into their experience in their world, We call that ethnocentrism. And it's not a good thing. Nobody wants to be ethnocentric. It's not cool. It's definitely not going to make you go viral for a good thing. It's going to make you go viral for a bad thing. So it's interesting to me because what we actually practice day to day in the neurotypical and neurodivergent relationships is neurocentrism. Now, I don't really know if that's a word or not. I don't know if that's a term, but if it's not a term, I'm coining it. I want you to know this video was where you got that term, neurocentrism. So most of the time we practice neurocentrism. That is, the neurodivergent person has to adjust to the neurotypical environment. And the neurotypical person doesn't, instead of trying to understand why the neurodivergent person may have done what they did or maybe what may be happening for them, they're just like, oh, if you're not meeting my standard or my expectation, then you're lazy, you're selfish, and all of those words that we are challenging the community and the rest of the world to rethink about ADHD and about neurodivergence in particular. So yes, that is why we named the channel this. Surprise. So that's double empathy. Now, this has been like a revolutionary concept for me in my life, and I truly hope that by sharing it, it becomes a revolutionary concept for you. And I encourage you to share this with your family members or your friends who are struggling with understanding why it is so hard for you to organize everything or to show up on time to every little thing. It's just a different way of being. I will talk a little bit about this, but as ADHDers, we have a little bit of something called time blindness. A lot of bit of it. Like a lot of it. Like if you were to ask me what happened a few days ago, everything for me is the other day. It's some day ago. I don't know what time frame it was because my ADHD doesn't keep track of things in a chronological order the way the rest of the world does. So double empathy would allow people in my life to, instead of looking at what I'm doing and seeing that I'm not doing what is expected of me, to realize that there may be more to the story, and again, respond with curiosity as opposed to criticism, and reserve your judgment because there may be more here. Now I'm gonna put a hardcore asterisk on this and say that double empathy is particularly challenging for minorities. I'm a Black woman, I'm a Black queer woman. And so what often happens with us is that any setback or perceived failure is immediately attached to our character. So say you are late to a meeting, people start to attribute that to CP time, or you don't have your house organized, people attribute that to lazy, or that you don't care, or you're sloppy. When you are in this skin, the world gives you many, many fewer opportunities for error. And so navigating the concept of double empathy for us in particular is going to require a lot of patience and a lot of communication. I'll say that up front. It's gonna be different. So because I lived this experience and because I'm in this skin, the advice I'm going to give you around implementing double empathy in your life is going to be very specific to my lived experience as a Black queer woman in the United States, which means that I'm going to teach you things and say things later in this video that'll help you troubleshoot some of the common misunderstandings that happen, particularly in the workforce and even in your personal life. But having this philosophy at the core of my life has been revolutionary. It is not perfect, it is not exact, and you will find people that are at varying degrees of acceptance with this. I will also say that that's not your job to convert them. If they don't want to understand your experience because they are comfortable with the judgment they've already made about you, then it is also not your responsibility to try to convince them otherwise. You're not here to continue to prove your character and yourself. You're worthy just because you exist. So first things first with double empathy, you really need to sit down and think about what is it that you need to be successful? What are you good at? What is it about the things that you're good at that makes them, is there a theme between them? An example of this is I happen to be really good at pattern recognition, and most ADHDers are. We're like mavericks at figuring out how things fit together. We can see how the flow and the big picture works. That's all that innovative neural connecting that our brains can do. We might be bad about implementing it and a little bit rough about seeing all of the other pieces, but we have some pattern stuff going on. So I'm really good about pattern recognition. The things that most put me at a disadvantage are things where I have to make on the spot, on the fly decisions, or I'm taking in a lot of information in one sitting. So because I know that about myself, I've created strategies to help overcome that. One of the things I talked about in my last video is that I record the meetings that I have at work sometimes. And I play those recordings back for myself, and I take notes on the most important parts of the conversation so that I can make sure that I caught what was important, and then I'm less anxious in the meeting. I can let my mind wander off and, be in I'm a mermaid in the ocean, whatever my brain wants to create that day, without the stress of I'm going to miss everything in this meeting and I'm not going to be able to contribute later on. So that's something that I do. Because I know that about myself and I know what makes me successful and positions me for success, I can communicate those things to other people. And so a key step step number 1 in making sure that you can implement this is to sit down and really do some self-reflecting. What makes me successful? What kinds of things and environments position me for success? When have I really shined? What are the kinds of things and environments that don't make me shine? What are the themes in those things? So that's the first step. Really sit down and think about those particular things. And a way to get at this, because sometimes I have a hard time sitting down and just writing stuff like that, is to reflect on a time when you were particularly on it, like you felt really confident, really strong, you were really proud of yourself. What was it about that made it the best? So if I reflect back on my own experience, one of the things I have to have is control of time. I can't have someone barreling down my neck and staring at me and counting down the seconds. I can't have a timeline that is super duper condensed because I can't be creative. So think about those kinds of things and write them on your paper, because they're going to be important for you as you begin to expand on how to implement this in your life. So that's step 1. Step 2 is then to formulate some brief ways that what would you change about the things that you weren't good at? So that thing that you thought about and you're like, I could have done a better job. What could have changed about that would have made it better for you? For me, at home in particular, I cannot think in clutter. And so when the house gets cluttered and it's a mess, I can't create, I can't think, I can't do anything really. It's kind of a paralyzing space. And so for some ADHDers, that's the everyday experience for them. I practice minimalism because I don't want to get there, because I do know the impact it has on my creativity. So in order for me to position myself for success, what I have done is reflected on the times when I was most productive and most creative. What I know about those times is that it was a clear space, there was a lot of space in the room, it wasn't a cluttered space, versus when I'm in a very cluttered, packed space full of things, my thoughts are equally as disorganized. So in order for me to position myself for success for a creative project, I know that I need to do the work on the front end to create some organization. I'll work with my partner and I'll say, hey, I have a big project coming up and I need to clear this space out, because in order for me to be successful in that project, I need room to think. And so she and I together will come together with a strategy and we'll clean the space, at least the working space that I'm going to be in, so that I can get what I need to get done. So what you see there is me being aware of what it takes for me to be successful, me effectively communicating that to the people around me, and then engaging them or inviting them to execute on that with me. So those are the 3 core things. So if you're doing the first step, you could do that for a variety of things. Even think about your relationships with people. Is it the certain number of people? For me, I'm not the best in a room full of people, but if it's like 3 of us, I'm okay. Over 3, I start to get a little overwhelmed. So for me, when I'm trying to have important conversations or I want to make a good impression, it's best for me to do smaller groups and not big conference style groups, because I'm not always going to be my best in that kind of environment. The other thing is it requires you to effectively communicate. And this is probably the hardest step. And this is step 2, effective communication. It's hard because you don't want to admit that something's wrong with you. You don't want to admit that you can't. A lot of people with ADHD live under this constant cloak of shame, where we feel like we have to prove to the world and to ourselves that we can do everything that everyone else can do without any kind of modification. Think about it carefully. No one is like that, not even neurotypicals. Everyone has something they have to have done in their life, whether that be, I just need to drink my cup of coffee in the morning. Everyone has something that they have to do in order to position themselves for success. So there's really no reason for us as ADHDers to feel any undue amount of shame when we say to the world, this is what I need if you want me to do this, and do it well. So effectively communicate. Honestly, most of that is going to be internal. What I did initially was I actually would write little scripts that I wanted to say to people. So if I wanted to come to you and, for example, go to my partner and say, hey, I have this big project and I need to have this area clean. If I was concerned that I might not necessarily deliver that message carefully, I would write it down. So I encourage you to write it down, or talk in another modality if talking face-to-face is not your chosen way of communicating that. But effective communication is the second step to implementing double empathy. The third is invite them to be a part of the process with you. ADHD, for the most part, can be a very, very lonely experience. You think you're the only person going through it. You think that people are going to judge you, or people have judged you. I know for me in particular, I have had people judge me based on things I've had to do for my ADHD, and it has been really hard to invite people into that space and be vulnerable. It is an incredibly vulnerable thing to say, hey, I need a little bit of help. Many people have trouble asking for help, and this is no different. So inviting them into the experience with you does two things. One, it actually makes your job easier because they have to do something to get something from you. And two, it encourages them to do something they have never done, which is be part of this process that they don't know anything about, which might lend itself to future curiosity. I'll give you an example. Several weeks ago, my boss came to me with a project. He had some very specific bullet point things that he wanted done in this project. Now, I know myself, I know that what helps me be successful is when I can ask clarifying questions so that I can make sure that I have full understanding of 360 of what this project entails. And so when he came to me with that project, in the past, I might have said, okay, gotcha, I'm gonna get it done. And I would have charged off into the moon with the expectation that somehow, some way I was gonna figure it out. And I would have gotten overwhelmed and stressed out, and it would have trickled into other parts of my life, and I would have just had a terrible experience doing it. The fun would just not have been there, and I would have had a lot of regret and even resentment for my boss for even asking me to do this. This time though, with double empathy as a philosophy in my life, what I chose to do instead was say, that's wonderful. I'm really excited about the project. I need to talk to the other people that are involved so that I can ask clarifying questions. Can you tell me who they are? Now, he told me who they were, which allowed me to then go ask those clarifying questions, do those one-on-ones, because as I mentioned, I'm not great in a big group setting. I'm really good in smaller group settings, especially when it comes time to take in information. So I was able to reach out to those individuals, have those one-on-one conversations, ask as many questions as I needed to, take really great notes based on how my brain needs to take that information in. And then by the time we got to the meeting, I was able to be successful and have everything ready. When I asked my boss for the names of the individuals, I also informed him that the reason behind my ask, which is I have ADHD, and the truth is that while your perception of me might be that when I'm in those meetings, I'm doing a great job, I have to do a lot of back work. I have to do a lot of research. I have to do a lot of one-on-one conversations for me to actually come to that meeting prepared. Part of the preparation is my having an opportunity to talk to everyone else that's involved, ask those kinds of questions. So I need you to provide the information around who else is involved in the project, not just this time, but every time in the future, if you want to help me position me for success. He went and he found that information and he brought it back to me. And now we have this new tradition of, when you come to me with a project, this is great. Tell me who's involved, because I'm going to need to go and talk to them in the future. That's what's going to help me. The project went well. I had a lot of fun doing it. I met some cool teammates, but that wouldn't have been attainable to me if I had just done what I would have previously done, which is just white knuckle through it and grit my teeth and try to make the most of a tough situation. So invite them into the experience and tell them what you need in the future to be successful. My experience so far is that for the people that really care about you, or the people that are really curious about you and want to get to know you and want to see you succeed, this won't be a problem. They'll go, oh, okay, I had no idea. Sure, I don't mind helping you do that. For people that don't, that's okay, because you can't win them all. But ultimately, those tend to be the people that you can now use this information to save your energy. People that don't want to participate in double empathy are like the people who don't want to be open to your culture. If you wouldn't entertain people who are not open to your culture, don't entertain people who are not interested in your neurodivergence. So those are the 3 steps really involved in double empathy and making it a part of your core life. It is definitely grounded in the idea, and honestly, in my opinion, the truth, that we as neurodivergents or ADHDers are not broken. We just have a different way of viewing the world, and that can be an amazing thing. There are going to be things we're great at, and there are going to be things that we need a little bit more help at. And just like with the neurotypical community. And so we shouldn't, one, be ashamed of asking for help, two, establishing what we need to be successful, and three, inviting others in to make that happen. That's it. That's double empathy. That's how you make it happen. I hope this was helpful. I'll continue to talk about this and how it's showing up, because it showed up in some interesting places and some interesting ways. And I think that it's an important step along the lines of, building your confidence as a person with ADHD in a very big world that oftentimes asks us to do things that honestly don't set us up for success. So, hope this was helpful. Sorry it's a long one. See you next week.